What's up guys, my name is Javier and welcome back to Tool Craze. If you guys have been following my channel recently, you've probably noticed that I've gotten back into woodworking. I've done a few projects in the past year and even showed you guys how to make a couple of things when it came to woodworking. I've also reviewed several woodworking tools, and today we're going to take a look at another woodworking tool from Ridgid, their 6 1/8 inch joiner. Aside from getting back into woodworking, I've also slowly been adding woodworking tools in my collection. I've already got my table saw, drill press, router with table, sanders, band saws, and a few other things such as a dust collector system. At first I didn't think I needed a joiner. It was one of those things that I would have liked to have on hand, but I didn't think it was necessary at the time. But it didn't take long to realize that a lot of pre-cut lumber from the local home improvement stores is considerably warped. This led to having to spend more time fixing the mistakes in the lumber or having a hard time putting together projects. The best example was a project that I did a while back when I made a set of dog steps. Everything went fine when it came to cutting, sanding, and finishing the project. But when it came to putting everything together, many of the boards didn't line up, and even though I got everything to work out in the end, it wasn't without a hassle as many of the boards were warped. What should have turned out to be a very simple project to put together after everything was cut wasn't. So that's exactly where a joiner comes in. With a joiner, you can fix any imperfection on lumber, and you can turn any warped board flat. When I recently did my latest bandsaw box, the original board that I bought was warped a bit, and it would have been a nightmare when it came to gluing up all the pieces that eventually made the blank to start off with. But I ran the boards on the joiner to even everything out, and it turned all the boards flat on both sides, making it very easy to put all the pieces together for the glue up. Now, normally when you want to even out a board on both sides, you'll want to use a joiner and plane one side until it's nice and flat. Then you take the board to a thickness planer to flatten the opposite side. As of right now, I don't have a thickness planer, so the best I can do for the time being is to run the joiner on both sides of the plank of wood. You can do this, and I'm not saying that you can't. It's just most likely you'll end up with a board with two completely flat spots on both sides. But each side may not be completely parallel with the opposite side. And in my cases, they were close enough, and whatever imperfections for not being completely parallel with both sides wasn't a concern for me, since I was simply stacking several pieces together to form blank. And it wasn't crucial for me that they would be completely parallel with each other. But anyways, back to this Ridgid joiner. It's not an entry-level model, as there are plenty of other smaller joiners out there you can get for a lot less cash. And it's not a high-end industrial model either. It fits somewhere in the lower end of the middle road. And I haven't had it for too long. It's only been a few months since I've had it, but I've only used it a few times, as I don't have a ton of projects that require me to use a joiner. A quick rundown of its specs and features are: it has a 1 horsepower motor, and out of the box it's wired for 120 at 12 amps, and you can also rewire it for 240 volts, and it'll run at 6 amps and 240. The blades are 6 1/8 inches, and it uses 3 of them, making 10,350 cuts per minute. It has a good sized bed with a longish in-feed and out-feed tables with a combined length of 45 inches. It has a 4-inch vacuum port. I have mine connected to my Harbor Freight 2 horsepower dust collector, and it does an excellent job at collecting dust that gets created. It's not perfect, as some of the dust does make its way outside and onto the bottom of the unit. This is because there are a few open gaps that aren't completely sealed on the joiner. And as you can see, there's a big open gap right here in the front, and some of the dust makes its way out of here in the front, some of the dust makes its way out the back, and some of it stays on top. But with that said, it still does an excellent job at suction, and I would say that what does make it out on the floor is about 1% of the dust that gets created. So that's actually pretty good. It's not perfect, as you still have a little bit of dust left over, but it's not much, at least in my opinion. But that's when it's connected to a dust collector. If you don't connect it to a dust collector, forget about it. You'll have a big, huge mess everywhere in no time. One thing I didn't like about the joiner when I was putting it together was that I noticed that the dust chute has a few large open slots at the bottom. The reason they're there is because the dust chute is the motor mount, and these slots are so that the motor can be bolted down, and so you can slide the motor to the sides to adjust the belt tension. Now, the problem with that is that you're left with holes in the dust chute, and a good fraction of the dust that's going into the dust chute will make its way out of the dust chute through these slots. So my solution to that was to slap some tape over these slots, and with that I don't have to worry about dust making its way to the floor from the dust chute. I just didn't like that I had to MacGyver the joiner. Now, I might place some tape over the front gap over here, but for now it's not that big of a deal. So moving on, it does come with a pair of push blocks to help you with running the boards through the joiner, and it also comes with a little accessory to help you square up the fence. You can use this to get a 90-degree angle in the back fence and to check the fence for when setting up the stops at 45 degrees. You will need to square up the fence out of the box, but I suggest not using the supplied accessory as it's not square. It's close, but it's off enough that it can impact your work if you need exact 90-degree angles. So check the back fence with a combination square. And both the push blocks and the angle gauge have built-in storage on the right side of the joiner, so you have them ready at all times. The good thing about the fence is that it has a few built-in stops you can adjust, so you just have to adjust these stops once, and then you can move back and forth between them, so you don't have to necessarily check the angles each and every time you move from one stop to the other. This stop is a 90-degree stop, and this stop tilts the back fence to 45 degrees. But the downside is that it was a pain to adjust these stops. And that's because as you tighten these screws, it throws off the fence alignment just a little as you try to tighten them. So it took me several tries to get it right. Out of the box, this joiner doesn't come assembled, so you will need to put it together yourself. It's also very heavy at 213 pounds, so you will need some help putting it together. And also when it comes to lifting this large and heavy cast iron bed and placing it on top of the assembled stand. Putting it together was fairly easy. It shouldn't be hard for most of you guys, and the instructions were very good, although some of the pictures were flipped, so it took me a little bit longer to figure out than it should have. In this picture, the dust chute should be facing the opposite side. Everything is correct except that the whole picture is flipped like a mirror image, as the dust chute and the electrical cord are on the wrong side. Other than those two mistakes, the assembly process was very easy, and good, easy to read instructions were given. As for the performance, the 1 horsepower motor provides ample power so that the boards are planed down at a decent rate. And out of the box, the joiner provided excellent results and created smooth flat boards after several passes. It leaves a good smooth finish, and nothing else is required if you plan on joining the boards together. If the plane surface is going to be exposed in your project, it will require final sanding, as even though it is smooth and flat, a closer look reveals tiny horizontal lines where each blade made a cut with the surface of the wood. It's not actually that noticeable unless you have good eyes, but you will need to give it a light sanding to even out the surface. The boards do come out relatively flat after being planed down. With the factory settings right out of the box, I got very good results. My boards came out almost completely flat after being planed down, but a very close look reveals that there is still a tiny bit of curve to each board after being planed. It's less than a 1/64th of an inch on long boards, and it really doesn't bother me at all, as I can live with these results, as it's actually not that bad. I can always go in and adjust the height of the cutter head, but I'll do that when it gets worse or I need to change the blades, as it's not very noticeable out of the box. As I was saying, I haven't had this machine for too long. It's only been a few months at the time of this video, and I haven't used it too much, so I can't say much on its longevity for the machine. As for the longevity of the blades, to try to simulate long-term use with the machine, I took apart 2 pallets and planed down both sides of each of the usable planks. I believe the boards are oak and they were pretty warped, and I had to run each board lots of times on each side just to get them to be flat. It actually took so many passes that I wasn't left with much of a board left. But I did this so I could see just how long the blades would last. So after planing the boards, I did notice that there was a small line running across the boards as I planed them, meaning that one of the blades got nicked. I took out all the nails before I processed the boards, so it got nicked simply from planing that many boards. The line was pretty small and insignificant, and at this point it wouldn't make much of a difference if I needed to join them together, or if I was to leave the boards exposed on my next project, as a light sanding would easily get rid of it. Also, those little horizontal lines are a bit more obvious after the planing down of all the pallet boards, meaning that the blades are starting to get dull. I'd say they still have a bit more life in them before I need to resharpen them. I don't know if you guys would think this is a positive or a negative, but the blades can be resharpened. Personally, I'd rather just have double-ended disposable knives so that when one side gets worn out, all I have to do is flip it over to the other side and I have a brand new blade. But I know many of you will prefer blades such as the ones that are included, as they can just be resharpened several times before you have to buy a new set of blades. So I'm almost done with this review, and the last thing that I want to mention is that this machine is pretty darn heavy. I think it looks much smaller in person than it does in the pictures, and it doesn't look that heavy, but it's just a little over 200 pounds. One thing I would have liked to see on this machine would be some built-in casters at the bottom like they included with their hybrid table saw. But unfortunately it doesn't come with any. So this means that you have to go out and buy a mobile tool base if you want to have some sort of mobility with this joiner. Luckily I saved myself some money and I just built my own mobile tool base so I can wheel it around. But just keep in mind that you'll have to either buy one or build your own mobile tool base if you want to move this joiner around in your shop. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section below. And help me out by liking this video and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And also don't forget to check out my other video on how to make a mobile tool base for this joiner or any other heavy shop tool. And follow me on social media over at Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and over at the web at toolcraze.net for more tool reviews, tool news, and tool deals. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.